Welcome, everyone, to the How to Get the Most Out of College podcast. There's a lot of talk about where to go to college, but not nearly enough about how to go to college. And it's the everyday decisions that drive your success. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've been a consultant to more than 100 colleges and universities, helping them improve their student experience. And I'm the author of How to Get the Most Out of College, where I take what I've learned about how college works and make it work for you.
This bonus episode is a conversation I had with Ed Geek podcaster extraordinaire Dustin Ramsdell. And we talk about technology in higher ed, what's working, what isn't, how it's changing, and what institutions and ed tech companies can do to respond to those changes to enable student success. It's a great conversation. I'm excited to share it with you. Give it a listen.
What has been your general experience with higher ed tech being implemented and utilized in institutions?
Well, what I love about higher ed is there is this culture of helping and supporting students. They'll see a need, and maybe it's about reminding students about their next appointment with a text message, or posting their courses online, or connecting students to alums and potential employers. And so colleges and universities, they see the need, they want to meet the need, they add a tool, they often add a department to support that tool, to train people on it. They add up maybe a center or an institute. And that's great because there's this culture of helping and support. But I think that the downside is higher ed is almost always additive. They keep seeing the needs and they keep adding more tools. And it's pretty rare that they'll actually consolidate or sunset a tool or a program or a department or a center. We do a lot of strategic planning for folks, and we're always asking, what are you going to stop doing to create the time, the space, the capacity to do this new stuff? And you get a lot of blank stares, and people are attached to their tools, their programs, and they don't want to let them go. And that means there can be redundancy, there can be inefficiency, it can create more costs. But I think even worse is sometimes there are too many tools and the students don't know, they can't navigate, or they don't know what's out there, and things get more complicated. And I think study after study keeps showing that one of the biggest barriers for students is just awareness about all the great stuff and all the great technologies that are out there.
Something that has come on my mind a lot is the idea of harnessing complexity, streamlining things at your institution, or sort of amplifying the tools that you have. But I think it is missing that component of what are you going to stop doing, or how are you going to consolidate things so that you're not maybe completely hollowing out what you do, kind of putting all your eggs in one basket into one tool. Yeah, I think that's definitely something I've been reading a lot about too, is you just kind of keep adding on. It's hard to take things away in higher ed. People almost get very protective, and then
Right.
you are kind of hindering the potential of all these great tools and resources and things that you're providing to students.
Yeah. And oftentimes the technologies that universities adopt mirrors their organizational structure. If you have ways that you're set up, ways that you're organized, kind of the technology ends up perpetuating that. Not uncommon, for instance, for student affairs to have some kind of initiative. Maybe they get a way to text students about an event, and then academic affairs gets another way to text students about an advising appointment, and it's two different systems. Maybe it even has two different signups and so forth. So a lot of times the organizational structure will perpetuate in terms of different tech.
Redundancy and underutilization would be kind of the death knell for any good higher tech, where it's it was implemented, it's being used, but not as much as it should, or there's already something else. And as an enterprise for the entire institution, it would be cheaper. Everybody can be trained together. There's just more efficiencies there, and not the annoyances or sort of friction points of any kind of friction you want to try to minimize or remove and everything. How do you optimize what you're offering and curating a very impactful digital student experience? What do you think is going to be required of ed tech tools and organizations moving forward?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to start by understanding the student experience as it is and as it could be. And it can't be a one-off thing. You have to get in a regular rhythm of understanding what's happening with your students. You want to use different methods, qualitative, quantitative, broad and deep surveys, focus groups, data mining, ethnography, interviews, you name it. And you want to not just look at your data, but you want to put it in context with peers. If you show clients how they compare to a peer set, anonymized as needed, like that's massively valued. So get in a rhythm of regularly assessing the student experience. And then I think, secondly, like we talked about earlier, get as good at subtraction as you are at addition, right? Like you got to break the cycle of new need equals new tool equals new department managing it so that you can focus and be more effective instead of spreading yourself too thin. And then you'll control costs at the same time. Third, this only works if you have like a culture of collaboration, of working across tools, across units to better coordinate the care and support, remove the redundancies, improve the experience, enable student success. And I think doing this, lastly, like doing this in a way where you're really focusing on things that have concrete ROI and real value for the student and the institution. And I think the good thing is a lot of this stuff you really don't need to guess at. Headline after headline is telling us that students and families are questioning the value of going to college. There was a recent Wall Street Journal poll, 56% think it's a quote unquote bad bet. That's largely because the cost has outpaced the value. And so really focus on the things that improve the value, whether it's active learning, student engagement, student belonging, mentoring, career connection, tie the tech to things with proven value, use that to make the case for it and measure your progress against it.
I think that's really, really powerful advice. And I think certainly other headlines we're seeing are a lot of institutions having to deal with budget shortfalls and all that. So it's just like, we need to just be very scrutinizing about where we're putting our resources. And sort of the digital ecosystem is no different than like underperforming academic programs or whatever else. It's just like, you want to make sure that you're really investing in tools that are giving a lot of ROI.
I think the reckoning on cost is coming. Administrative bloat and lazy rivers and climbing walls are maybe easy and obvious targets. In most cases, there actually isn't much administrative bloat, and it isn't the lazy river that's breaking or the climbing wall that's actually the problem. It's just macroeconomic structural things about shifting the cost of education from the state to the student. But I think the reckoning around the cost of technology is coming because pretty soon people are going to start to see we just keep adding more and more, and graduation rates aren't improving, career placement aren't improving, starting salary aren't improving, first to second year retention aren't improving. What are we getting for this investment? And just being very focused is a beautiful thing. You can better help students, you can better support students, you can not be spread too thin, and you can save money in the process.
Yeah. Even just if you get too overextended, you can get into kind of the vicious cycle of cutting and drawing back and trying to almost like end up undermining your mission because you're just constantly having to be in sort of a place of like fear or scarcity or something versus like doing it in a place where, yeah, you're evaluating, putting the emphasis in strong digital tools or anything else, and then able to kind of like sunset things or do things kind of on your own terms and in a more sort of caring way.
Well, and I think in other sectors, it just happened more naturally as a matter of course. Like I got an email yesterday, you probably got it too, but Google is sunsetting Google Podcasts. I love Google Podcasts. I'm a lifelong Android person, but I'll get over it. They're rolling it into YouTube or something. It'll be fine. It'll take me a couple of days to adjust, but that's one less thing for them to support. If they can do it, I think universities can too.
Interesting parallels we're seeing in higher ed. There's just some of that happening right now where it's like forcing the point, and that can certainly also be an opportunity for innovation and growth and changing the sort of paradigms. But to wrap up, any parting advice that you would give to higher ed leaders when thinking about their evolving tech stacks?
Well, I enjoyed the conversation, especially about the value and the ROI of ed tech, focusing on students. And I guess the thing I'll say in closing is really just to emphasize this point about digital sprawl and the proliferation of tools. Suburban sprawl, you can feel those downsides in a tangible way, right? You have a long commute or you have like a dead city center at night. Digital sprawl is just as real, but it's maybe harder to see. And if the students that feel it and the staff that are supporting these proliferating tools and trying to train people on them and get the word out and support them. And so unless you have ways, unless you get in that regular rhythm of talking to students and staff and hearing from them and looking at the data, you won't see it. And I think getting as good at subtraction as you are at addition, so students don't get this runaround from place to place, platform to platform, that's really a tool to have in the toolbox. And just think twice about before adding anything new, figure out what you're going to take away, understand how it integrates, and you'll be on the path.
Yeah, that's what I always say when sort of looking at my closet or something. It's like, take stuff away to make room for what you love. It's a very interesting sort of place where I think we're finally beginning with institutions utilizing a learning management system in a way that was never really designed to be used. And then like websites where they've become these massive like libraries of pages and things that just aren't easily searchable. And it is this sort of digital sprawl is such a great way to kind of put it. And how can you start to kind of curtail that, organize it better, make it more easily searched and tailored, personalized, are all sort of the action words that hopefully are ringing in folks' heads as they are considering their tech stacks, as trying to kind of take an inventory on the digital sprawl. Why is it sprawling that way? Do they want to kind of trim a bit here to expand over here? Or
And I think these can be, there's all these great books now, Atomic Habits, Tiny Habits, about how small things can make a big change. And I think just getting in the habit of subtraction is such a healthy practice. A friend of mine has this rule when he travels that if he doesn't wear something, he has to give it away when he gets back. He really sticks to it. He's quite deliberate about what he packs, and he packs lighter than anybody I know, because like he doesn't bring extra crap with him. Or like I know lots of libraries that have limited stack space, so they move to a one in, one out policy, and they basically say if we're going to have these new acquisitions, we're going to deaccession these other collections. And obviously it's harder to do than to say, but I think like building that as an organizational habit is really healthy. So I'm hopeful. I mean, we've been talking about it's a bad bet and there's digital sprawl and all these things, but I remain quite hopeful about higher ed and the role that tech can play in student success in particular.
Absolutely. I agree. And yeah, being critical or wanting things to be better, it's like because you care, you believe in it and you want it to reach its full potential. So I think, yeah, even where I think we're seeing that we are part of kind of this wave that is sort of happening. And I think we're just trying to kind of harness the complexity of institutions and drive it more towards this digital first future where it's just like, okay, we are making this ecosystem that's going to help support people, drive them to get them into an office or connect with one another so they can go to the dining hall together or whatever. Like it's all just sort of investing in here first, because again, that's the sort of accessible entry point or just sort of equalizing factor for students. And yeah, it just helps to organize things in a way of like coordination of care and support. That is just a good sort of outcome. It could be that kind of catalyst to start kind of what you're talking about, that kind of organizational culture of sort of evaluating, like, does this integrate with our kind of core engagement hub? Does this sort of embody some of like the same values or things because we're seeing success here? So how do we sort of hold other things maybe up to a similar standard?
Yeah. And I think if you don't, like, it actually gets perverse. You end up in these crazy situations. Like when the COVID vaccine first came out, the way I was able to get it early is I said, like, let me find like the worst website I could find. Let me find like the worst UI. So I went to like the local hospital system website, and it was like so many layers deep and like 2-factor authentication and all this shit. And like half an hour later, I had a vaccine appointment like 3 weeks earlier than everybody else who was going to Walgreens that made everything simple and easy. I think that's what you're trying to avoid. You're trying to avoid that level of like complexity and redundancy and inefficacy. I only suffered through that because
Desperation being the motivating force. It's like, yeah, hopefully all our students are so desperate they will go through our like awful website. Because I mean that's like the tragedy is
don't
that
depend
hospital.
on desperation. Is the final word of advice. Yeah.
Don't depend on desperation. Yeah.
Thanks everyone for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And check out ElliotFelix.com for all the episodes and the articles I've written, talks I've given, and more information about the book.